similar with the app, right? If you are offering an app from your company, whether it's a business enterprise, a public administration or a government department, the ISO standards still apply to them. So, ISO standards not only apply to products and services, but also apply to companies and institutions, right, including government institutions. So, many a times you will see certain institutes saying they are ISO 9001 compliant, right, along with several other compliances. That is what it means. They are not talking about products at that point. Generic also signifies that no matter what the organization's scope of activity is, if it wants to establish quality management system, ISO 9001 gives the essential features, or if it wants to establish environmental management system, ISO 14001 gives the essential features. Management system means what the organization does to manage its processes or activities in order that its products or services meet the organization's objectives, right. So, the quality, we had spent quite a bit of time understanding what quality is, like that it should meet the objectives or meet the requirements at the value which was promised to the customers, such satisfying the customers' quality requirements. What do the customers have in mind in terms of quality, performance? Complying to regulations and meeting environmental objectives. So, that is the role of a management, to make sure they are able to meet certain quality standards, regulations are all followed and environmental objectives are met. They are not doing something unnecessary like disposing of batteries on the site, right. Use of plastics, for example, have been banned in majority of the places. If they are using a lot of plastic products, dumping them in the rivers or somewhere else, that is totally not acceptable, right. To be really efficient and effective, the organization can manage its way of doing things by systemizing it, right. Nothing important is left out. So, there has to be a quality management system in place which takes into account that all the processes or steps are as per the ISO 9001 recommendations or ISO 14001 recommendations. These are generic recommendations which can be followed. Everyone is clear about who is responsible for doing what, when, how, why and where. So, the management systems have to be very, very clear there. So, it should not be like two segments or two departments are fighting that I have dumped a waste somewhere because we do not know whose responsibility it is to manage that waste, or somebody is compromising on the quality, like let us say the designer level or manufacturer level, because they just do not care. That kind of an implementation will harm the entire product line. Even so, like when you are in the medical device industry, you have to make sure every protocol, every person specifically knows and they have a clear idea of what quality standards they have to follow. Management system standards provide the organization with an international state of the art model to follow. State of the art is the latest in the market, right, like latest cutting edge, right. In order to become cutting edge in your product development, you need to follow these standards and implement this through the right management practices. Further, large organizations or ones with complicated processes could not function well without management systems. So, do you think like any of these big companies are just complying with a few things, not complying with the others? Can they really get by? As a startup, we may get by because very few people know us, right. But as a part of a huge company which has so many big stakeholders to small stakeholders, and if something, even a small thing really goes bad, with the diagnostic devices, let us say for example, you are building diagnostic x-rays. If your x-ray machines are not giving the accurate results, then it is a huge havoc, right. You want to make sure your devices which are going out as implants and wearable technologies are also all compliant. So, companies in fields such as aerospace, automobiles, defense or healthcare devices have been operating management system for years. So, majorly in these areas you have to be very careful that you are ISO compliant or at least following some generic standards. The ISO 9001, 14001 management system standards now make these successful practices available for all organizations. These are public documents, right. You can go over the ISO 9001, 14001 practices and just follow them at heart. Then most of the these are very generic standards to make sure the basic quality requirements are all maintained. and there would be requirement of more stringent standards which are complying to the country's law and regulation of medical devices and other things beyond this, right. And some part of this may have already been adopted as a part of the ISO standards. So, both ISO 9001 and 14001 concern the way an organization goes about its work. They are about processes, but not the products. So, ISO 9001 or 14001 is never a product compliance or a product standard, it is a process standard. It just shows how high quality processes are being followed in your company, right. They are not service standards also. It does not mean like how well you are servicing, like your telemedicine service, how is it proceeding. They are process standards. How are you bringing about the telemedicine service? How is your app performing? That is not the ISO standard. How are you building that app? Is it meeting the right quality standards of building that app? That is the process standard. Then you can be ISO 9000 compliant. They can be used by product manufacturers and service providers in the right context, right. Processes affect final products and services. So, this is a very important point. That is why the ISO compliances are placed on the processes, because the way I am going to do a certain job, like let us say I am supposed to make a delivery which I am supposed to do in 5 minutes for this particular medicine where there is a need. So, there are so many ways of doing it, right. I take a shortcut and I deliver it 10 minutes late by doing something else. That is one way of doing it. Second is I deliver it a bit early 5 times, and from the 6th or 7th time I deliver it poorly. So, there are so many shortcuts and wrong techniques which can happen. The right quality standard is, if I know I have to deliver within the 5 minutes time frame, I make sure I deliver it with all due diligence, right. That is the right process. Then it will make sure that the service was properly implemented, right. So, this ISO 9001 gives the requirement for what the organization must do to manage processes affecting quality of the products and services, right. This gives a lot of these standards. ISO 14001 gives the requirement for what the organization must do to manage processes affecting the impact of its activities on the environment. So, it clearly lists out what are some of the potential negative impacts on the environment and what should not be done, right. Certification is known in some countries as registration. So, many a times we talk about, have you registered your product? So, that basically means have you got your product certified, right. Like, so certification and registration terms are used interchangeably. It means that an independent external body, typically whenever you are talking about certification or registration, has audited an organization's management system and verified that it conforms to the requirements specified in the standard, which is ISO 9001 or ISO 14001. So, we have something which does say or certifies that this company is ISO 9001 or 14001 compliant. Otherwise, anybody can say I am compliant, right. Even as a startup, I may say I have read ISO 9001 and 14001 and I say I am compliant, right. Just saying that sometime is not good enough. So, that is why many of the bigger companies or companies who need a lot of credibility in the market or are into the export businesses, like where they have to compete at the international standards, they would usually certify themselves through an independent auditor or an outside auditor who would audit their company and certify it, that now I am certifying that this company is maintaining everything by the book and they can be certified 9000 ISO 9001 compliant. Is ISO people doing it? No, ISO does not carry out certification. This is a very important point to be noted. ISO is not a certifying body, it's a regulatory body which sets out certain regulatory requirements, and out of those 9001 and 14001 are the generic requirement. It does not issue or approve certificates, it does not give out certificates. So, if you may be thinking that I have to get a certificate from ISO, that is not the case. It is usually a standard set of documents. If you follow those processes, some company can certify you. Like I'll give you an example. What the civil engineering department and several of the IITs, the faculties there do is there is a certain bridge or a certain building, the design of which needs to be approved or certified. They have been built with all the due diligence. So, those designs, drafts or the calculations are sometimes brought about by the company or the builder, and based on the assessment and their feedback, and if everything is done right, they would put this on their letterhead and certify, I certify based on a as a expert faculty in IIT that this building is compliant. Very similar with a lot of these medical devices. It could be that some of the hospital doctors or specific experts are certifying, I certify that this dental implant is good to go, right. These are conforming with all the standards. But of course, when you get into the medical devices domain, it is more than ISO certification. That ISO certification is just not good enough, right. But if you are looking at something harmless which is not inside going inside your body, like wearable technologies, then of course CDSCO is required, like as per Indian compliance, but ISO 9000 can also be followed, right. As this is a hallmark of better credibility, right. Like, so it's if you say I'm 9001 compliant, 14001 compliant, this just looks very nice that this company is something legitimate, and if you are certified, even better, right. That's why we look for certifications. If you have completed a degree, you have completed a degree. Your experience is one part and your certification is another part. Certification gives it in writing that you have completed your degree. That has nothing to do with the learnings, right. Very similar story. Accreditation is like certification of the certification body, right. It means that the formal approval by a specialized body as accreditation body, that a certification body is competent to carry out ISO 9001 or 14001 certification in specified business sectors. So, certificates issued by an accredited certified body known as accredited certificates may be perceived on the market as having increased credibility. So, many a times we talk about AICT accreditation like of institutes, right. Like very similar to that, we want to give accreditation, this is accredited by so and so body, right. ISO does not carry out approving accreditations, right. This is something to be very clearly understood. Neither ISO gives out any certifications, neither it approves that so and so Ram and Sons or this whatever this specific government entity or any other entity is accredited to give certifications for 9001 or 14001. It never does that. So, these bodies are standalone auditors, like for example, if there is a financial auditing, PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC, Deloitte, they may be auditors like in certain firms. They are private companies, but they are renowned auditors. They are looking at the financial sheet or the entire financial plan of a company, or what their market presence had been and things like that, right. But they are not accredited from ISO, right. Like, so they may be accredited like to based on their name and fame, and of course like the time which they have spent like to gather that experience and expertise. But ISO does not provide accreditation that these companies you can look after to get a certificate of ISO. So, this is something to keep in mind as an entrepreneur, because many a times we may be thinking that this so and so company is going to give me accreditation and I am going to pay this 5 or 10 lakh of rupees to get an ISO certification. So, there is nothing called ISO certification which is given by ISO. It is only certified by an accredited organization which can give you based on the audit a compliance, right, that this is compliant. This is just like IIT or some company telling, oh, this as per my expertise I feel is a good idea that what you are doing, right. This is well validated. This is to be well understood, like to avoid any frauds and things like that, right. Certification is not a requirement of ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. This is another very important thing to understand. The organizations can implement and benefit from ISO 9001 and 14001 systems without having been certified. This is again I am placing this emphasis, right. The organization can implement them for the internal benefits without spending money on certification program. So, you as a startup can be ISO 9001 or ISO 14001 compliant but not certified, right? You do not need that certification. By spending so much money, you are trying to get an ISO certification, thinking now my product can sell at a better price or people will think I am more legitimate. That's never going to happen. So that misconception is to be broken as per this knowledge, right? Certification is a decision to be taken for business reasons, like it could be a contractual, regulatory or market requirement, right, that you take certain certifications if it meets customer preferences. So many of the times there are products and services which the customers demand that I would like a certificate. Like for example, can you just finish your 10th grade and say the next 4-5 years I have taught something by myself, it's a self learning process, and go get a job in a company? Probably not. Very difficult, like, right? Like, so without a degree or a certificate you will not be able to get that. So that's the preferences of the set of preferences for the company. But do you never get a job out of the 10th class or 12th class? Yes, you get a lot of jobs which may not be hi-fi jobs, but are kind of very daily or wage or contractual kind of jobs you may get, right? So to meet the specific customer preferences, sometimes you may need a certification. It is a part of risk management program. Certain times you want to have certain certifications to avoid risks or things which may happen specifically in the medical device industry. It will motivate staff by seeing a clear goal. Sometimes certifications are also done to clearly showcase that these are the processes we have to absolutely follow. We cannot deviate from it. Compliance is still something where you can tweak things a little bit. Certification means you have to adhere with it, right? ISO does not carry out, like I said, 9001 and 14001 certification. It does not issue certificates. It does not accredit. This is just a summary of things. Approve or control the certification bodies. It just develops standards and guidelines to encourage good practices in accreditation and certification, right? So this is all that it does. Looking more into the ISO 9000 family, it's the standard that gives a requirement for quality management system. So ISO 9001 2008 is the latest and improved version. There may be some recent versions which I have not updated myself. This is again based on a little bit older public information. It is the only standard in the ISO 9000 family that can be used for certification. So another very interesting thing to know, ISO 9001 2008 is the only standard in the 9000 family that can be used for certification. No other standard in the 9000 family can be certified, right? There are 16 other standards in the family that can help an organization on specific aspects such as performance improvement, auditing, training and so forth, right? So there are several other specific standards under this family which can be implemented. So next, coming to another very important standard specifically for medical devices, this is ISO 13485 standard. You may have come across this if you are trying to work in the healthcare space. You write healthcare devices, regulations and standards, this is something which will pop up surely, right? So as you can see, this kind of big bubbles here, ISO 9001 is on the left side, which is focusing on the customer satisfaction and continuous improvement, and ISO 13485 is some additional set of rules and regulations for additional medical device requirements, greater documentation and safety requirements. So this just lays out some of the important aspects of, if you are working with a medical device, what should be the key requirements to make sure the quality standards are as per the industry, and to make sure it is all safe and sound, and what kind of documentations or safety standards have to be followed by heart, right? So you can see a very narrow, very large overlap, actually very large overlap between ISO 9001 and 13485, right? So majority of the 9001 aspects are already adapted in the 13485 with some extra additions. So that is what this 13485 is, and you will probably see them very commonly. So many a times, if your company is ISO 9001 compliant or certified, I am going to use this term separately because compliance is separate and certified is separate. if you are compliant or certified, you are most likely also compliant for majority of 13485 medical device standards, right? But you have to still comply with a few more regulations and regulations of your land, which is specifically in India, like CDSCO and other norms, to make sure you are totally compliant, right? So, just a quick demarcation into what are the differences between or comparisons between the ISO 9001 and 13485. From a product specification standpoint, ISO 9001 is applicable to any organization regardless of the industry. ISO 13485 is only applicable to organizations that manufacture and handle medical devices. So, 13485 is kind of a subset of 9001 with majority of the things adapted, right? It is only catering to medical devices. From a regulatory requirement standpoint, ISO 9001 does not necessarily have to be followed for specific regulatory requirements. The regulatory requirement may vary significantly depending on the industry, right? So, for gas valves or oil industry, there may be different safety or regulatory standards. For medical device wearable, there is different regulatory standards. For drugs, there are different standards, right? So, ISO 9001 does not have to be always followed, but they are very generic standards. For ISO 13485 must follow all the regulatory requirements pertaining to medical devices. This is a must follow for all medical devices. As far as the documentation requirement, the documentation requirements are more generic and less stringent for 9001. For 13485, the documentation requirements are extremely thorough and may include specific standards for the different life cycle stages of the medical devices. So, many of the medical devices categories are clearly laid out here as per the classes. These may not be as per the Indian classes which we are looking at, but almost in a similar fashion, right? You will see low risk and high risk devices, they are clearly laid out what are the extra set of standards which needs to be followed. From a customer satisfaction standpoint, customer satisfaction is an important focus for 9001, although the specifics may vary depending on the industry, right. So, this is much more generic. For 13485, customer satisfaction is also equated with customer safety. So, it is not only the satisfaction, it is also looked upon as seriously as customer safety. So, safety is also a very important criterion 13485. From a continual improvement standpoint, the responsibilities through ISO 9001 implementation is for quality control are distributed among the members of the organization, right. So, every member or every department needs to be ISO 9001 compliant if you are trying to claim your organization as 9001 compliant. But for 13485, the emphasis is on the process driven approach. Clinical performance evaluation and risk management processes are a key part of this. How do you make sure you have done the right clinical set of steps, you have not skipped anything? You have looked upon the risk management. Let us say this clinical trial in this with this particular implant or drug is doing really well with 200 people. Is this something good enough when you are trying to roll out for crores of people, or does it have to be done in thousands or 5,000 more people? What are the stringent requirements, or people in different demographics, age groups and so forth, right. So, all these things are very clearly laid out as a part of 13485. Requires a QMS management team. This is very, very important. If you are with a medical device company, you need a quality management system based management team, QMS medical management team, in order to implement ISO 13485. So, just getting more into the ISO 14000 family, this is the standard that gives the requirement for environmental management system. 14001 like this is 2004 is the latest and improved version. This is the only standard in the 14000 family that can have a certification for environmental standards and risk management. Of the 14000 family includes 21 other standards that can help an organization with specific aspects such as auditing, environmental labeling, life cycle analysis, etc. From the ISO survey, the worldwide total number of certificates to ISO 9001, 2001 like in the different years have had gone up quite widely, going from 1993 to 2010, but have kind of stabilized or gone down in certain aspects as there is more awareness about ISO standards going to 2022, right. Like, so these are the number of certificates which were issued, right. Like, you are looking at 12 with 5 zeros, like approximately 12 lakhs. So, it shot over from very few thousands to almost uh, 11 to 12 lakhs in around I could say 2010, when the medical device industry was not that well known, and many of the companies felt like ISO certification is a must. That awareness has come along, and I am also trying to give you an awareness through this public information that it is not a mandatory practice, but it is good to have, right. You do not need a certificate to start with. So, with that, the benefits of ISO 9001 and 14001 is basically international, which forms an expert consensus on the state of art practices for quality and environmental management. So, think about if you are a wearable technology company or an implant management company which is trying to sell implants abroad. How would they know? Like, let us say you are trying to send your implants made in India from India to the US. How would they make sure that all your steps, clinical trials, everything was done rightly? This is where you could have a ISO 9001 compliance or a certificate to make sure they can talk in similar terms. Otherwise, there is no way of saying I had a good practice or I did it right, right? You can only say it was done right if you talk in the same terms that we are ISO 9001 compliant. Now they know that your processes are at least at par. If you are certified, even better, right. So, this is a common language for dealing with customers and supplies worldwide in business to business segment, right. These compliances are taken very, very seriously. That is why whatever product you look up for these kind of standards. This increases the efficiency and effectiveness. So, you basically then do not have low quality or substandard products go around in the market. This weeds out that part, right. This also provides a model for continual improvement. That is the overall purpose of having a ISO or some form of regulatory standard fit in, to make sure that there is a continual amount of improvement. It also is a model for satisfying customers and other stakeholders. It builds in quality into products and services from design onwards. So, during your design thinking in the different phases of product development, as well as up to the commercialization, ISO 9001 or 14001 compliance or certification helps you build the quality and maintain the quality at every level. It addresses environmental concerns of customers and public and comply with government regulations. So, many a time it is a you are talking about green energy, or I am producing this particular set of devices which are not going to affect the environment, right. So, many of the companies stand for those. So, you are also taking care of that through the ISO 14001 compliance. It also integrates with a global economy. Now, you are talking a language which everybody can understand. It is like if I go to the Europe, I am not going to talk in Hindi, right. I am going to conversate in English. So, it is a very similar thing. When I talk about my products, I said they are compliant by this rules 13485, 9001. Now, anybody in the medical device industry would know these guys are compliant. Now, we can talk in terms of what could be the revenue, what all the levels of manufacturing we want to do, because if there are questions about compliance, then the conversation can go longer and things will not materialize, right. So, some more benefits: it leads to sustainable businesses, creates a unifying base for industry sectors, and also you can have very clear qualified suppliers for global supply chains, right. The suppliers, if they are ISO compliant, then these suppliers are trustworthy and they are having some at least quality standards. Otherwise, if they are not compliant with anything, they can be very, very shabby suppliers, right. Suppliers of small components, repair parts, so many of these are used in the surgical devices and medical devices, right. This also makes sure that there is technical support for regulations, like if there is these set of documents or regulations, make sure it is very clear, or there is a tech support for any kind of these problems which may arise for not complying with the regulations, right. It also helps transfer of good practices to developing countries, which is getting more and more important. So, it is a good idea to be compliant. It creates tools for new economic players, regional integrations, and facilitates the rise of services, right. So, with that, these are some of the sources through which you can look up all the necessary documents. Hopefully, you have got a very clear insight into what ISO regulations are, what are the key regulations from the Bureau of Indian Standards and CDSCO, and the other medical device standards like 13485 are in the Indian context, right.